East Baltimore.
I grew up in East Baltimore, up around Hartford and 25th Street. They call it Darley Park community. But both of my parents migrated from North Carolina in the 1950s. My mom was from the Rocky Mount area of North Carolina, my dad from below Fayetteville. But every summer they would pack my older brother up 2 years older, my younger sister 2 years below, and ship us down the country for the summer. And so we were in cotton fields and tobacco fields and peanuts and fishing and hunting and gardening. And so that really provided a great relief to the grit and grind and the asphalt and concrete of the city, just to kind of go out. And even today, I still enjoy walking on dirt paths and stomping in mud puddles. I've seen almost a metamorphosis going from the 1950s. Again, we lived up near Clifton Park. And so to have open space and greenery, and most of my childhood was outside. I mean, in Clifton Park, we had a football field and baseball fields and swimming pools and golf courses and rivers and creeks and those kind of things. And so everything was out of doors. I mean, we had to be back in before the street lights came on as a kid. But all day long, we were out in the street doing things. And so it was a time of exploration. And even in our part of East Baltimore, the Darley Park community, 25th Street, Darley, Hartford Road, Wolf Street, I'm sure your listening and viewing audience know all of these routes. But what I would also say is I knew the alleys in Baltimore better than I knew the streets. That was part of the richness to me, just understanding all aspects of the city. And I was just involved in community affairs and government. And so it was just an exciting time. But what I see today is that it's not as much out of doors. The young people, as well as the elders, just don't have that same connection to the out of doors that I grew up with in the 50s and the 60s in East Baltimore. That just a lot of milling around, or people really don't want to go out. The parks and the activities are not as robust, and the swing sets and the basketball courts and all of that. People just seem to have gotten alienated from the out of doors. The Blacks of the Chesapeake began as a project in about 1984 that my dad would carry my brother and myself, his uncles and cousins, fishing on the Chesapeake Bay, hunting on Maryland's eastern shore. And I really became oriented from that standpoint to, again, fishing and hunting on the waterways of the Chesapeake. That really exposed me to a world that I really didn't know existed, and particularly when I started seeing black men and black women owning land, owning farms, owning boats, fishing and crabbing on the Chesapeake Bay. It just lit me into a world I really didn't know, because even in Baltimore, my uncles and cousins worked at Bethlehem Steel, Sparrows Point, or Armco Steel. And even when you hear a Sparrows Point or Bethlehem Steel, they were making ships. Those were shipbuilding companies, and they were right in Sparrows Point, right on the waterways. My dad worked at Continental Can Company, and canning was a big part of farming, whether it was vegetables, whether it was oysters, whether it was fish. Canning was the way that things were packed, stored, and shipped. And don't forget Domino Sugar. I mean, just that whole connection to people in our family and neighborhood that worked in these maritime industries, but no one never really connected the dots to the Chesapeake Bay, to the Patapsco River, to the inner harbor, the outer harbor. So it just opened up a whole world for me. So often, if one goes to a college, university, or a public library and pick up books related to the Chesapeake Bay and start flipping through the page, very seldom you will see people of color. If you did see them, the caption would say crab picker, oyster shucker. No other agency, no name, nothing about how long they've been in the business, nothing about what their aspirations and disappointments were. So I began to collect these photographs for the National Archives, Maryland Archives, and then I would go around the Chesapeake Bay and throw these pictures out on the tables at fish fries and churches and community buildings. People say, that's my mama, that's my granddaddy, that's my uncle. And then we began to do oral histories and telling these stories. And so over the last 30 years, that's what we've been doing, traveling the deep end and the shallow end of the Chesapeake Bay communities, hanging out, mixing up with waterside people, struggling communities as well as thriving communities. But it all harkens back to my time in East Baltimore when the banana boats would come into the inner harbor and the Black Union was Local 333. And so that's what we've been doing, and that's what the Blacks of the Chesapeake is dedicated to, is sharing the legacy of African American men and women whose lives have been shaped by the Bay.